see how he would just be drawn to her. She referred to him sometimes as a big kid. He seemed to have a really great sense of humor. They wanted their relationship to turn out to be the American dream. They were going to have some kids, and they were just going to have a happy life.
But when media reports about a John Doe hit the airwaves, the American dream turns into a deadly nightmare.
The body had been dumped in the ditch.
He was wearing only a white t-shirt and a wedding ring.
Was there some kind of sexual?
As investigators piece together evidence, they uncover clear signs of a killer.
If you have a type of personality, it leads to that type of anger situation.
They went to him with the idea that they're intentionally involved in a homicide.
That noose is getting tighter and tighter and tighter.
Who are you protecting? I'm not protecting anybody. The people we have cleared obviously are not suspects, but everybody else remains. Does that mean Irene? You betcha.
December 19th, 2002, 11:30 a.m. A local scavenger in Springfield Township, Michigan, is hoping to turn trash into treasure.
An individual down near Oak Hill Road was collecting cans and bottles for purposes of cashing them for deposit.
But as he scans a roadside ditch for recyclables, he makes a chilling discovery.
Those that found a body.
The man immediately alerts local authorities.
When the call came in, we were just advised that a body had been found, and the entire unit was sent up there to start the investigation.
Homicide investigators soon join first responders at the scene.
I think it's going to be a little bit to your right. Yeah, I see it now.
The body was in what I refer to as a semi-fetal position. Knees were drawn up, arms across the chest. He was wearing only a white t-shirt and a wedding ring.
The investigators make a determination that he had been shot.
We discovered he had 2 bullet holes in him.
They had the victim there, but they had no idea who the victim was. So the first thing you do, you're going to find out who it is.
Police are unable to locate any official identification at the scene, but they do find something else that might help.
The only distinctive features were the fact that he had a large Grim Reaper tattoo on one arm. We started trying to figure out how to identify the body, and ultimately we went to the media with a picture of the tattoo.
Less than 24 hours later, the media exposure pays off. Just after 6 a.m. on December 20th, shows distinctive ink.
They had received a call from a woman who said that she suspected that the body was her husband's.
I saw the picture of it. I think he got baby. Do you think so? Yeah. What's your husband's name? Michael. What is your name?
Born on August 26, 1974, Rebecca Jordan grew up in Berkeley, Michigan, an idyllic suburb of Detroit.
I think she had a great childhood. She was quiet, nice, sweet. She always wanted to be a mom. That was her main thing.
As soon as she graduated high school, Rebecca got married to her first love, Jason.
Becca and Jason were high school sweethearts. He was a good guy. You know, they just married young.
While Jason began pursuing a career in film, Rebecca decided to follow a very different calling.
She joined the Navy. She wanted to see the world. Her grandfather was also in the military, so she thought that was really cool that she would do that.
In January 1995, Rebecca headed to basic training in Tennessee. The distance from home put a strain on her marriage.
She got into the military, and it just didn't work out. They just grew apart.
Rebecca became fast friends with her fellow recruits and found common ground with one in particular. 22-year-old Michael Smith also knew the struggle of going through training with a spouse at home.
He was in the class with her along with a couple other friends that she met. They were both married.
2 years older than Rebecca, Mike was originally from Bartow, Florida. From a young age, Mike had rebellious tendencies.
He got into trouble at school. He was disruptive, and he, liked to run around with his friends and party.
When he drank quite a bit. I think they maybe refer to it as binge drinking.
In 1990, after dropping out of high school, Mike attended a rehabilitation program to get his life back on track. Mike soon became close with the program's pastor, and the experience pointed him in a new direction.
The pastor there had called him in, feeling very strongly that he was called to be an evangelist. He was so excited, he called me to tell me.
Shortly after Mike changed his ways, he began dating a woman named Penny. And after just a few months together, they got a life-changing surprise.
Penny got pregnant, so then they started making arrangements to get married.
In 1993, 21-year-old Mike became the father of a baby girl, and he and Penny tied the knot.
Michael loved his daughter very much. She was just a baby when they got married.
Mike tried to...
He was drinking and he was doing things that wasn't good for a marriage, so the marriage just ended up not doing well.
Penny encouraged Michael to enlist in the military as a way to save their marriage.
He was just not very happy with the way his life was going. It was kind of going in all the wrong directions. So he decides to go in the Navy. And that's where he met Rebecca.
As Mike and Rebecca bonded over their marriage struggles, the friendship soon turned into something more.
I could kind of see how he would just be drawn to her. She referred to Michael sometimes as a big kid. You know, he seemed to have a really great sense of humor.
As her feelings for Michael grew, Rebecca decided to come clean with her husband, Jason.
Becca and Jason announced, we decided we're getting a divorce. It was very amicable. They both realized that they were too young when they got married.
Michael also brought his struggling marriage to an end.
Penny and Michael were together, I think it was 4 years, and then they divorced.
Michael and Rebecca left the Navy and were now free to follow their hearts.
They didn't have a relationship until after they both separated from their spouses. Michael really loved Rebecca. It was just the way he was about her. It just made me feel like he really loved her.
In 1997, the couple discovered they were pregnant.
They were very excited about her getting pregnant. I believe he wanted their relationship to turn out to be the American dream, that they were going to have some kids and they were just going to have a happy life.
With a child on the way, the couple returned to Rebecca's hometown of Berkeley, Michigan. There, they welcomed their first son, Josh, on November 17th, 1997.
Josh was everything. That was her baby. She just loved him to death. Then in 2001, Rebecca, she was pregnant again. Michael was very excited.
After their second son was born, Rebecca poured herself into her children.
Rebecca and Michael, when they were raising their kids, she was a good mother to them.
She was very loving and caring. She was always there for us, me and my brother.
But in 2001, the family fell on hard times when Mike was injured during a job.
He tore something in his shoulder at work and was just out of work.
He was still struggling with alcohol addiction, and I think that Rebecca did probably condemn him for that.
I know that they struggled with rent a lot of times. I think that they had to live with her family quite a bit.
After nearly a year of struggling, Mike found work at a car dealership, and things seemed to be looking up.
And he just felt like he could get his life straightened out.
But Mike's progress is cut short on December 20th, 2002, when Rebecca and her family recognize Mike's tattoo on local news and contact authorities.
Okay, Sergeant Woods is on the line and he's going to talk to you.
Smith, I understand you suspect we might be talking about your husband?
Yes, I know that kid too.
Now, has he ever been arrested?
Yes.
What for?
DUI.
With a lead on an identity, investigators searched their system for a forensic match.
Mike had been arrested previously, so we had someone else go over to a neighboring community and get a set of his fingerprints, which confirmed Mike's identity.
With their John Doe identified, investigators can focus on finding out how 30-year-old Mike Smith ended up dead on the side of the road.
The body is taken into custody by the Oakland County Medical Examiner's Office for an autopsy. And at that point, we're pretty much stuck until we get an autopsy report, because despite 2 bullet holes that may or may not be the cause of death, that figures into the investigation.
Coming up, detectives trace
dropped him off at the bus station Tuesday. We're supposed to be going back to Florida. And I haven't heard from him since.
And a trail of lies leads to a killer.
I think that all led to a certain amount of frustration and enhanced anger.
December 20th, 2002, Oakland County, Michigan. Authorities have positively identified a John Doe murder victim as 30-year-old husband and father Mike Smith.
It's absolutely tortured me, seeing my father's tattoo on TV and hearing that he had been shot twice. That's actually one of the most vivid memories in my mind.
18 hours after their initial survey of the scene, investigators returned to the body discovery site in search of more evidence.
We did have deputies go back and fairly a large number and do a physical search of both sides of the roadway, down into the ditch and such. We did check for bullet casings, bullets, anything in the area.
A thorough search of the area comes up dry.
It was obvious that the body had been dumped in the ditch. There was not the place as to where the victim was murdered.
Our guess was that he had been removed from a vehicle at the top of the road and rolled down the slope.
In search of a witness who might be able to validate their suspicions, investigators canvass passing motorists.
The gentleman who had found the body was determined that he just had stumbled on his body, so we had seen anything the night before, the day before. It's pretty much standard procedure. You don't hold out a lot of hope, but every now and then you get lucky. But we didn't.
With no new leads, detectives go to the home of Mike's widow, 28-year-old Rebecca Smith.
You never know how people are going to react when you tell them that they've lost a family member or a loved one. She was collected. I mean, I think she's a pretty strong person to start with. We went through the basic information at that point and then asked, obviously, when's the last time you saw Mike?
Her initial statement was that her husband had made plans to go to Florida to do an alcohol rehab. On December 10th, around 6 o'clock or 6:30, I believe, she said she picked him up at his work and then took him down to the Royal Oak bus station. She dropped him off in the back parking lot of the McDonald's, so he had to walk across the street to get into the bus station. I think he had $115 or $120 on him.
Rebecca says that Mike had long struggled with alcoholism, but had been improving in the past year, until financial stress drove him back to his old habits.
He wasn't making a lot of money to start with. Rebecca was making less than that, so there's money problems.
When he was an alcoholic, he wasn't that pleasant to be around. But when he would be sober, he would pick up his Bible and just go totally the opposite way. Michael was drinking a lot. They'd get behind on their bills and stuff. Rebecca didn't like him drinking like he did because she wanted him to not be irresponsible. He has a family, he's got kids.
According to Rebecca, when the Smith family received an eviction notice in late November, Mike knew he had to make a change.
Michael was a born-again Christian. Michael was drinking a lot. He knew that he was not supposed to be doing that the Lord was not pleased with that.
Rebecca said Mike was going back to programming he'd been in as a young adult. She said that Mike had quit his job to go into this program. It was an effort to save their marriage.
He just knew that I've got something going on and it seems like that I'm not able to control it. I do need some help to control this.
After speaking with Rebecca, detectives head to the Royal Oak bus station to search for record of Mike's travel.
We go to the station trying to verify when the bus went, where it went, if he was on the bus.
It turned out that on December 10th, Michael Smith did not buy a ticket to go to Florida.
We had been through the passenger roster, and there was nobody that matched Mike's information.
Mike doesn't appear on any of the station's security cameras either.
As I recall, nobody even bought a ticket to go to Florida that night. We were starting to believe Mike had never gotten on the bus.
Something more sinister happened after Rebecca dropped him off. For more insight, detectives contact Mike's family in Florida, who have already heard the devastating news from Rebecca.
When she said Michael was dead, I couldn't take it. What is this? Can't be true. What happened to him? How did he die? what's going on.
As detectives speak to Mike's mother, she confirms that her son's drinking had been a problem for years, but Mike was trying to get help.
He called me in November, and he wanted me to send him a plane ticket. He wanted to fly down and work on some of his issues. But he said, hurry up, because he was afraid he was going to change his mind.
Mike's mom says that the very next day, Mike called her back and told her to forget about what he said.
He changed his mind. It was getting close to Christmas. He didn't want to leave his kids, and he didn't want to leave his wife either.
Did Mike have another change of heart and decide to head to Florida after all? His mother doesn't seem to think so.
Michael, first thing he would have got in touch with me. He would have told me, because he would have been happy for me to know that he was going there.
Hoping Mike's co-workers might be able to provide more insight, deputies head to the dealership where Mike worked.
Mike never indicated to anybody at work that he was leaving for Florida or planned on quitting.
It was bizarre anyways because nobody knew. I do remember him being a no-show to work, which was very not common for him.
It was on the day that he went missing. He'd been in a mandatory 401k meeting at work, and he was talking to coworkers about how he was going to invest money. The fact that he was talking future-looking plans directly related to his employment led us to wonder, why would he just up and take off?
As police continue speaking to coworkers, one woman says she heard a rumor about Mike.
He had been seen in a gay bar. The location that he had been found near was rumored to be next to an infamous truck stop where maybe certain activity would have been taking place. So the gay rumors were running rampant.
Coming up, did a secret lifestyle play a role in Mike's death?
Because Michael was seen in a gay bar, you can say maybe a gay lover did this.
As the investigation deepens, new suspects emerge.
They have made statements that if Mike did come back, that he would kill him himself.
I answered if you shot Michael. She said, I'd say no.
In late December, might have been leading a double life. Weeks before his disappearance, Mike was spotted somewhere that seemed completely out of character.
Michael was seen in a gay bar up there, so you can say, well, maybe a gay lover did this.
You take a look at the body, and it's got a t-shirt and it's got no pants. Why doesn't he have any pants on? Was there some type of sexual assault?
Had Mike been killed by a jilted lover? Mike's coworkers tell detectives they should speak to a man named Dan.
There was an employee at the dealership, and in talking to him, he said that he'd been at an establishment where one night of the week was a big night for gay clientele, and he ran across Mike in there one night.
According to Dan, Mike seemed out of place.
Mike was intoxicated, and Mike was trying to hit on a couple of women who apparently were lesbians, and Danny told Mike, go home. You don't know what you're doing here.
Go into gay bars. You can't say that you're gay because you went into a gay bar.
My dad was one of those guys that anywhere there's booze, he's gonna be there.
Ruling out the likelihood of a scorned secret lover, detectives turned back to Rebecca.
We had multiple conversations with Rebecca. As we're working through the investigation, it's kind of incumbent upon us to keep her abreast of what's going on with it as it evolves.
On December 23rd, 4 days after Mike's body had been discovered, detectives sit down with Rebecca once again.
As we desperately need your help on this, okay? We need you on our team. Okay? And the only way we can do that, you probably know what's coming, is we have to take polygraph to clear you over completely. Okay? Okay. You'll be fine.
As soon as the polygrapher is available 3 days later, Rebecca comes to the station for her polygraph exam.
Chris Lanford was the polygrapher, great investigator. Arguably, polygraph operators are the supreme interviewer.
You do what's called a pre-test interview. You go through things that had happened. That's all done prior to giving her the actual examination itself.
As polygrapher Chris Lanfear talks to Rebecca before her test, she reveals new details involving a man named Randy Parks.
She was in the process of moving out of the marital home. They were being evicted. She had a guy that she used to work with. He was helping her because he had a truck. Rebecca said that this friend had made statements to her that if Mike did come back, that he would kill him himself.
She did insinuate that Randy Parks may have very well been responsible for the murder.
Why would this friend take such violent action? Rebecca has an idea.
She kind of intimated at one point that this friend may have been kind of burning a candle for her.
Around 7 p.m., Rebecca...
The polygraph was conducted between the test subject and the polygraphist. And then we get the report afterwards. She ultimately killed him.
And she was confronted by the polygraph examiner that she was lying.
Detectives are eager to confront Rebecca as well.
If you're not involved, you pass the test. If you are involved, you fail it. It's real simple. Real simple. You would not have failed that polygraph at all. You deliberately withheld information. Who are you protecting?
I'm not protecting anybody.
Detectives press Rebecca about her relationship with her former co-worker, Randy Parks.
How long has this thing been going on with Randy?
I have never had an affair with Randy. I have never been physical with him.
But you know he had a crush on him.
Yeah.
How's he know that?
Slowly and deliberately.
There's only one thing in Randy's mind. It's time for the truth. You're obviously trying to protect him.
I have no knowledge of Randy doing anything to my mom.
Then detectives turn the tables.
Did you plan to look into that person to have Michael killed? No.
Last person to see a homicide victim alive is the first one to see him dead. Which is pretty simplistic, but I mean, that's who you're looking for. So, at this point, we've got a little more interest in Rebecca because we've yet to locate anybody that saw Mike anytime after she did.
You and Michael weren't getting along. You're the last one to see him. And we can't verify that. Do you understand the problem we got here?
Yes, I do.
Do you understand the seriousness of the situation you're in?
It's fine. I know you don't believe it. I do my best. If Randy did this, he did this on his own.
Detectives release Rebecca after a tear-filled interview. When detectives track down Randy for questioning, he seems calm and cooperative.
We went to him and said, hey, your name came up in this investigation. It's a search for the truth and the facts.
I'll tell you this. We cleared 3 or 4 people, and there are some people that we're unable to clear or haven't cleared yet. The people we have cleared, obviously, are not suspects, but everybody else remains. Does that mean Irene? You betcha. Describe your relationship that you and Rebecca had. Well, I thought we were pretty good friends. You know, she was called Isabel Michael. Drinking, and I can understand drinking part. Did she want anything more? For me? Absolutely not. What about you with her? No.
One of the things that came out with Randy was that, he was happily involved.
Rebecca had expressed animosity towards her husband, Mike.
Back in August, she said, I wish you would just go away and die. She'd be that kind of to you. Right. If I asked you if you shot Michael, you said, I'd say no. I asked you if you 100% know who shot Michael Lowe, you said, I'd say I don't know. If I asked you those questions on a polygraph, how would you do? I'd pass it. Take one. Sure. I didn't do nothing, so.
He could not wait to come in for the polygraph. I mean, it was like, yeah, let's go do it right now.
That evening, investigators received Randy's polygraph results.
He passed, there wasn't a problem, there was nothing to indicate any deceptive behavior. Randy was completely forthright with us. We cleared him out.
Based on Randy's polygraph results, detectives believe he had no involvement in Mike's murder. But they're not so sure about the person who pointed the finger at Randy.
Now we're starting to talk about the grieving widow is becoming a suspect.
Coming up, new evidence exposes a chain of lies.
When confronted about the phone call on the night that he went missing, she said, all right, I wasn't being honest.
And autopsy results reveal a bizarre twist.
He had at some point been frozen solid.
After failing a polygraph exam, 28-year-old Rebecca Smith had landed herself on detectives' radar during the investigation into the murder of her husband, Mike.
There had certainly been marital issues. She had indicated to, I believe, some of her friends or relatives that she had planned on divorcing Michael Smith, the victim, at some point in time. She had indicated that she wanted him dead. She wished they would just go away and die.
Were Rebecca's statements serious threats or the harmless venting of an angry wife? Detectives subpoena the Smiths' phone records and sift through the list of calls made around the time Mike was last seen. Investigators find a call on December 10th to the home of Rebecca's grandparents.
The phone records indicate there was a call to Mary Jane's house made from the marital home of Mike and Rebecca.
Police reach out to Rebecca's grandmother, Mary Jane Jordan.
We interviewed the grandmother. She said, oh yeah, Mike called that night, 8:30ish in the evening, looking for Rebecca.
Mary Jane says when she asked Rebecca about the call the next day, Rebecca told her Mike was on the road to Florida.
It was verified by phone records that the call was made from their home in Berkeley. Certainly, he was not on a bus at 6:30 in the evening when he made a phone call at 8:30.
2003, Oakland County Sheriff's detectives summoned Rebecca back to the station to address the discrepancy.
So he calls at 8:29 or whatever, because she looks right at the clock. Do you know where that call originates from? So
when confronted about the phone call on the night that he went missing, she said, all right, I wasn't being honest, he came back that night. But I didn't want to tell my grandfather because Mike was supposed to be out of my life.
Rebecca says when she learned they were being evicted in November of 2002, her grandfather agreed to pay for another apartment on one condition.
My grandpa made a big speech about after when we had signed the lease, literally as we're leaving the apartment office. You know, Michael never sets foot in this house.
Rebecca says she'd agreed to her grandfather's terms, but she secretly convinced her husband to go to rehab instead of ending the relationship.
She wanted to make her marriage work. You know, she wanted her boys to have their dad in their life. She wasn't divorcing him. She wasn't doing any of that.
Rebecca says that after she dropped Mike off at the bus station on December 10th, he found his way back to their house.
you can't admit it. He came back to disappoint your grandparents. That's it, isn't it? This is not about disappointing your grandparents.
Everything is.
No, it's not. Tell us what happened. Let's get through it.
She admits that she lied and then comes up with a second story. That it was the next day that she drove him to the bus stop and then he was going to take off back to Florida.
Rebecca, you know, I would love to believe her.
Myself and you guys.
Yeah, but see, you're not giving us anything to garner any more trust than you did before. The only thing that's changed is the fact that instead of taking him to the bus Tuesday night, you took him to the bus Wednesday night.
We attempted to verify that, and all of a sudden was able to determine that that's a lie as well, because there is no tickets that was ever sold, and the victim was never seen in the bus station on the 10th or on the 11th.
So, the grieving widow lies to the police who are trying to find out who killed her husband.
I know I've made myself look like shit.
Now, you made yourself look guilty. You made yourself the number one suspect. Is what you've done. Look at it from our point. Why wouldn't you?
I know.
Let's do this. Why don't we just give me another polygraph Tuesday before the bus?
To test Rebecca's new story, another polygraph is scheduled for January 14th, and she is released. That same day, detectives receive a comprehensive report from the medical examiner's office.
There were 2 bullet wounds, one to the heart and one to the liver on the right side, and based on...
The medical examiner shed some light on the circumstances of Mike's murder.
One distinctive feature that we discovered through the investigative process was that he had at some point been frozen solid.
Mike was not murdered there at the scene because of the condition of the body. We believe that it had been done several days prior, and ultimately the body was stored and then transferred to some type of refrigerated atmosphere, and then transported from that to the ditch itself.
On January 10th, 2003, investigators execute a search warrant at the home Mike and Rebecca lived in just before his disappearance.
In Mike and Rebecca's bedroom, there was a closet, and the doors were off the closet.
The dimension of the closet was something like 20 inches by 60 inches.
Mike's measurements in that fetal position were about the same as that closet, lengthwise. Our working theory was that Mike had been in that closet for a period of time. The crime lab came in and did some testing, and they'd actually discovered some blood in the seams between where the tongue and the groove meet. We cut the floor out and sent it off to the State Police Crime Lab.
Investigators are eager to speak to Rebecca again, but when the time comes for her scheduled polygraph, Rebecca doesn't show. A lawyer representing Rebecca calls police the following day and tells them that Rebecca will not be speaking to them again.
She knew she was getting into real hot water, and probably the best advice that anybody could give her was to lawyer up. You can't ask her any further questions, so they concentrate on the investigation and other aspects of it.
When police revisit the phone records from Michael and Rebecca's home, they discover an outgoing call to a 1-800 number dialed on December 20th, the day Mike's body was identified. Investigators soon connect the 1-800 number to a life insurance company.
They obviously went to the insurance company and verified that through their interviews with people there. The life insurance policy that she had on him was a $200,000 policy. On the 20th, she makes a call to the insurance company to put a claim in before she even calls the victim's mother to advise the mother that Michael Smith had been killed.
During their conversation with the insurance agent, detectives learned that December 20th wasn't the first time Rebecca called.
She called in October to find out the status of the policy. And the insurance company told her, well, it's basically lapsed, but if you make a payment, you can get it caught up. And so she made a payment. So now we start talking, well, there's a big flag, there's a motive.
In addition to the discovery of Mike's insurance policy, investigators soon receive forensic evidence that further solidifies their suspicions of Rebecca.
The blood, and
they did testing. The blood came back through DNA as Mike's blood.
Coming up, investigators work to unravel the ceaseless schemes of their adversary.
All right, honey, expect a letter from me like Tuesday or Wednesday, and I can take care of it from there, okay?
It was pretty Machiavellian.
And a killer's deception is dissected in court.
She had a proclivity for anger management.
She wanted to get rid of him.
By early 2003, Oakland County detectives have zeroed in on Rebecca Smith as the prime suspect in the murder of her husband, Mike Smith. Investigators believe Rebecca killed her husband after several years of spousal resentment boiled over.
The fact that the victim in this case certainly had an alcohol issue, as well as financial issues, where all of a sudden she's going to be losing her home. I think that all led to a certain amount of frustration.
Feeling confident in their case, detectives pass it to the state for an indictment.
I was determined at that point in time that there was insufficient evidence to go forward with a criminal charge.
Without an indictment, investigators reach an impasse.
It gets to a point where our argument is not going to get any better. We got what we're going to get. We're not going to get a videotape of her doing it.
What I wanted was the truth to come out. That's all I wanted was the truth. And if they felt that they needed some time, then I already kind of just prepared myself to do that.
For the next 4 years, family members and investigators keep close tabs on Rebecca.
It was grueling, She got a life insurance policy, and it was very frustrating.
We were a little disappointed when she got it. As I recall, she bought a house.
She never went out. Never had very many friends unless they came over to the house and watched X-Files with her. She was always doing stuff with us, making sure we were okay.
Until 2006, when a turnover in elected officials brings fresh eyes to the case.
There was a new administration that came into office, and several cases were then looked at again, this being one of them. It was determined that there was sufficient evidence to go forward, and a warrant was issued for open murder against Rebecca Smith.
It was inconsistencies. It comes down to the totality of the information, the various stories she told to people about the relationship.
All I ever wanted was the person that did this to be held accountable. And now this is happening.
As Rebecca awaits her trial at the county jail, her phone calls are monitored as part of standard practice. On July 6, 2007, Rebecca asks her sister, Rachel, a cryptic question.
Anytime I send you something, check the back of the letter, because I always write something on the back there. I don't trust the around here. Because I was wondering why you always wrote stuff on the back. That's exactly why. All right, honey, expect a letter from me like Tuesday or Wednesday, and I can take care of it from there, okay?
After the suspicious exchange, authorities begin to monitor Rebecca's mail on July 9th, 2007. They soon intercept letters Rebecca sent to her sister and a friend.
When she's in jail, she's asking them to basically pretend that they are the killer and to write a letter to the court, to the media, and also to her lawyer to indicate that somehow they're out there, that they're the real killer. That was basically a gift from the defendant to the prosecution. I think it clearly indicated, showed her intent.
I just couldn't believe she'd done that. I totally thought there's nothing that made her look more guilty than that.
Ultimately, Rebecca, I think, was charged with obstruction of justice on top of the murder charge.
Rebecca's trial begins on October 26, 2007. Prosecutors tell the jury they believe the murder occurred on December 10, 2002.
He was in bed, asleep. It appeared like she walked in the bedroom and shot him in the chest and in the stomach.
My theory is that Rebecca then moved the body to a closet in the bedroom of the marital house where they were living at the time. And then at some point, Rebecca moved the body to another location where the body froze. And then on the night of December 19th, Rebecca drove the body to Springfield Township, stopped on the shoulder of Oak Hill Road, and pushed the body down into the ditch.
Prosecutors say that the motive was simple.
She was just tired of struggling. She was tired of living with her family. I don't know if them losing their apartment maybe for the umpteenth time was more than she could bear.
If he were to be eliminated, that eliminates her problem with him, and it also eliminates her financial issues. And it goes along with her statements that she just wished he would go away and die.
However, the defense claims that although the marriage wasn't perfect, Rebecca would never turn to violence against Mike.
My mom still loves him. Still has a picture of him pinned up right next to where she sleeps. She doesn't hate him at all.
I think Becca remembers him and thinks of him as just a confused, lost soul. And I think she wanted to save him, but he didn't want to save himself.
As for the damning letters from innocent mother,
She wanted to get granted bail so that she could get out and see us before she went away. And I believe that. My mom cared very dearly for me and my brother.
On November 6, 2007, after 2 days of jury deliberation, Rebecca learns her fate.
The jury came back with a verdict of second-degree murder. The court then sentenced her above the sentencing guidelines to 30 to 60 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections.
To some, Mike wasn't the only casualty.
I don't think anybody could ever know what that could do to a kid. Not just to lose a parent in such a violent way, but at the hands of their other parent. I don't think that it gets any worse than that.
My mother being taken for the murder devastated me much more than the murder of my father. It was the most devastating thing that ever happened to me.
The Bible tells me that I must forgive, that vengeance is mine. He'll take care of it. So I'm going to say, I forgive Rebecca for what she did. I believe justice was served, and that was all that I wanted to happen.
For more information on Snapped, go to Oxygen.com.
They belong to the upper crust of society.
He was so charming and such a gentleman. She was very well dressed, very well put together.
You couldn't ask for a better couple.
But their charmed life together crumbles when a mysterious meeting ends in bloodshed.
You could see his body laying right beside the vehicle.
An investigation exposes tarnish in a once polished reputation.
From his words, they were having an affair.
The community could not believe it.
It was like, yeah, I did it for the money.
And as the investigation makes headway, a 20-year-old secret that had long since been laid to rest returns to the surface.
We got it up out of the ground and opened the casket.
You don't hang out your dirty linens for the world to see?
She said there is a lot going to come out that people don't know about.
Kinston, North Carolina is a place where the tea is sweet and neighbors look out for each other.
Kinston, North Carolina, it's a small town. Once you get in this area, you're in the South. I mean, be ye not confused. This is the South. A lot of traditions. We still pull over to the side of the road for any funeral procession. That's what we do.
Kinston's a family-oriented community. Everybody likes each other. Everybody help each other. And everybody knew each other.
But the harmony of this small southern town is disturbed on Tuesday, January 21st, 1992. At 7:42 a.m., 55-year-old town socialite Sylvia White bursts through the doors of the Kinston Police Department, distraught over her husband, Billy White.
She's crying, very hysterical, and telling me that Billy went to meet a man somewhere out in the county to sell a large insurance policy, and that he had not come home.
Sylvia was up at midnight and Bill still hadn't returned from his meeting.
Police are familiar with 59-year-old Billy White Sr., a prominent businessman in town.
We, the police, knowing Billy, said, well, maybe he just got off with some friends, they might have had some drinks, and maybe he didn't show up, but we took a report of him missing and the vehicle he was driving.
After a day passes with no sign of Billy, local authorities launch a search effort.
I went over and asked our chief, could we go get a plane from...
Billy Carlisle White was born on December 30th, 1932, and lived in rural North Carolina all his life.
He was a Southern boy, raised, born and bred, true grit all the way.
Billy was very outgoing, very friendly, and he was just nice to everybody. Everybody enjoyed talking with Billy.
Billy capitalized on his charisma and became a door-to-door insurance salesman.
He was so charming and such a gentleman that he sold you something, and then when he walked out the door, you realized, oh, I just purchased an insurance policy.
Matter of fact, he probably sold 90% of the police officers some type of insurance. He was great friends with police officers, and we all liked him and his family. We knew them personally.
In 1953, the young businessman married Anita Jones. As Billy climbed the sales ranks, Anita stayed home to raise a growing brood of children. In 1969, she delivered their fourth child, Billy Carlisle White, Jr.
After Anita gave birth to little Bill, she had a lot of problems. She was unstable. Now we would call that postpartum depression, but back in the 1960s, we didn't have that diagnosis.
Anita's battle with her mental health eventually took a toll on her relationship with Billy.
It was agreed that they would divorce and Bill would take care of the kids. He had his hands full. He was a rising career man. He was trying to make it in the insurance world and raise 4 children.
As chance would have it, a concerned neighbor, Sylvia Ipock, came to the rescue.
Sylvia didn't live too far from them, probably a few doors down.
Sylvia would bring a hot meal to the family, she would do their laundry, and Sylvia was a godsend for him.
Like Billy, Sylvia was a Southerner, through and through. Born on November 15, 1936 in Lenoir County, Sylvia had a rocky childhood.
Sylvia's mother died when she was 5. She had suffered an appendicitis attack. And a few years later, Sylvia's father died from alcoholism. So she was 5 when she was sent to an orphanage. Eventually, her sister petitioned the courts and she was able to get legal guardianship of Sylvia.
After moving in with her older sister, 15-year-old Sylvia came into her own.
Sylvia had a fiery tongue.
A teenage marriage gave Sylvia a son, but the marriage soon ended in divorce. In 1959, the single mother met her next suitor, 24-year-old Leslie Ipock.
Leslie Ipock was easygoing, and he worked out the overnight transportation.
She was in her early 20s. They got married. Quickly, they had 2 children and were living the life. She was as happy as she'd ever been.
With Leslie by her side, Sylvia transformed from a restless Spitfire into a refined Southern woman. While Sylvia was thriving, the same couldn't be said for her husband.
He was having some health-related issues from the chemicals from the trucking firm that he worked for.
He'd get sick, and he'd get well again. He'd get sick, and he'd get well again.
When doctors failed to treat his consistent symptoms, Leslie sank into a deep depression. In June 1967, things went from bad to worse.
Sylvia comes home, calls out to Leslie. Leslie, where are you? She goes to the bedroom.
She opened the door and went in there. He was shot in the left side of his head.
He had committed suicide.
With Leslie's death, Sylvia became a single mother once again. She soon noticed that her neighbor, Billy White, was experiencing a similar struggle.
She was a widow with 3 boys. He was a single man with 4 children. Being the Southern gal that she was, she chose to swoop down and come in and do laundry. She cooked him meals, and he needed someone like that in his life.
Billy was extremely good to Sylvia. He would bring her gifts and he would bring her flowers. They seemed like a happy couple.
Billy and Sylvia married on December 3rd, 1971.
Bought a larger home. Sylvia was a full-time mom to Billy's children and obviously to her own.
But on June 21st, 1973, tragedy struck when Sylvia found 4-year-old Billy Jr. unconscious on the kitchen floor.
She took him to the hospital. The nurse said he had plastic down his throat.
They pronounced little Bill dead. He had choked to death on a piece of plastic from a dry cleaning bag. Bill Sr. was devastated about little Billy's death.
Billy told me himself about the accident. He said, you don't know when things are going to happen.
In the wake of his son's death, Billy Sr. threw himself into work.
Billy was a member of the Millionaires Club for Jefferson Pilot Insurance Company, which is a major insurance company in North Carolina and on the East Coast.
Over the next 2 decades, Billy and Sylvia became prominent members of Kinston Society.
Bill and Sylvia would go to church on Sunday. They were involved in their charities. They were involved at political events. They were really a big, powerful couple.
They belonged to the upper crust of society. Sylvia White, because of Billy White, was a part of that.
After a tough start in life, the happy couple had spent 20 years building a dream life together and seemed to be in prime. Until Billy went missing on January 20th, 1992. In hopes of spotting Billy's van, police launched an aerial search.
In Jones County, there's not many houses, very remote, and it's just woodland. We flew all over the place. We didn't see a thing. I said, let's make a few more circles.
On January 21st at about 4 p.m., the aerial search yields results.
My pilot, the airplane like to the right, and I said, there's the car. So he got closer, and we could see Billy White laying on the ground, on his back, with a white shirt with big red spot.
Coming up, was Billy a victim of a random crime or a deadly plot?
items had been taken out of his pockets. We thought maybe he'd turned down the wrong road and somebody followed him and robbed him.
On their hunt for suspects, investigators stumble upon a scandalous twist that no one saw coming.
When he was confronted, he immediately started to sing like the Temptations. He just started to spill everything.
January 21st, 1992. During an aerial search for missing Kinston man Billy White, North Carolina authorities believe they've spotted him on a remote logging road.
We couldn't believe that we found him. There's the van, and you could see his body laying right beside the vehicle. You could tell, even from the air, that something bad had gone wrong.
After Assistant Chief Ingram radios officers on the ground, multiple law enforcement agencies converge on the scene.
It was turned over to the State Bureau of Investigation, and the other agencies assisted us. I arrived on the scene and identified myself. Billy was down on the ground on his back.
He had what appeared to be 2 gunshot wounds. The body and his pockets were turned inside out. Billy was shot with a shotgun, but there were no shells at the scene.
Investigators are unable to locate a murder weapon, but they do make another important discovery.
During the crime scene investigation, what we found were 2 different sets of tire impressions in the dirt. And fortunately for us, they hadn't been disturbed by weather or anything else, so we were able to get good impressions and rollouts from those tire impressions.
You can see where a vehicle had spun their tires, so I photographed it. If we did find tires, a comparison could be made.
While processing the scene, investigators begin to formulate theories to explain the shooting.
His ring was missing. Items had been taken out of his pockets. We thought maybe he turned down the wrong road and somebody followed him in and robbed him. Initially, it looked like a robbery, but of course, there are aspects of it that are not consistent with the robbery.
You have to look at all the evidence and try and piece together an assumption as to why. Why he was shot 2 times. If you get hit by a 12-gauge shotgun in your chest, pretty much a goner.
When you shoot more than one time, you'll kill somebody. These people wanted to murder Billy White.
Hours after discovering Billy's body, Kinston police notify Sylvia of her husband's death.
She was all hysterical and crying. And, we all had a few tears in our eyes, too, because we knew the family.
When officers take Sylvia's statement, she tells them that Billy had an appointment with a potential client the night before.
She said an individual named Timmy Connors had called the office and wanted him to meet with him in Jones County on an old logging road.
He wanted to buy a $500,000 life insurance policy, and that's where he was looking at some land. As a result of that, Billy agreed to meet them at a certain time and rode out to that location.
It did feel like it was strange because Billy would go to see anybody to sell an insurance policy because he was a go-getter.
SBI agents launch an exhaustive search for the potential insurance client, Timmy Connors.
I was the agent for that particular area, and I'd never heard of anyone named Connors in Jones County, but we had to pursue that lead.
In 1992, it's not like it is today. Like you can pull your phone up, pull up names, pictures, addresses.
You look in Jones County? No. You look in the phone book? No. You look in Department of Motor Vehicle Records? No. Next thing you did, maybe you came from somewhere else. So I had to check basically every hotel from Carteret County, and I went to Raleigh, checking every hotel.
Through our investigation, we could never find any Connors in that area, in a motel, hotel, or anything.
Shocked to find another familiar name.
The only thing of interest I found in checking the hotel was that Sylvia White had checked into a hotel in Raleigh the day of his demise.
And the surprises don't end there.
She didn't go to that hotel room alone. There was another individual that was there with her.
That other individual is a man named James. When investigators track down James, he agrees to meet them at the Kinston Police Department.
When he was confronted, he immediately started to sing like the Temptations. He just started to spill everything about Sylvia White.
Well, he admitted to having an affair with her for over a year or so.
He explained in the past she had gifted him very expensive gifts. You're talking $8,000 or $9,000 Rolex watch. He loved it.
James tells investigators that on January 20th, he paid for the hotel room in cash and only stayed from noon to 2 p.m.
She'd called him and asked him to meet her at the hotel in Raleigh, and that's what he does.
After their rendezvous, James says he returned home and Sylvia headed back to Kinston. He denies having anything to do with Billy's death. After concluding the interview with James, investigators summoned Sylvia to the Kinston Police Department and asked her to describe her whereabouts the day of Bill's murder.
Sylvia said she was at the Sheraton in Kinston. They were having a cosmetics seminar. Bill knew she was there. He was out working with clients. He stopped by, gave her a kiss. Then he went to have dinner at a local restaurant, and he told Sylvia, "I'll see you when I get home."
Though Sylvia fails to mention her afternoon rendezvous in Raleigh, multiple eyewitnesses confirm she was at the cosmetics seminar in Kinston later that evening.
The night Billy disappeared or was killed, Sylvia had asked me to go with her to a meeting at a local hotel and have dinner.
That was a clear-cut alibi, just plain and simple for her.
Sylvia doesn't admit to an affair with James. Investigators are still unable to link either of them to Billy's death.
There was suspicion of his wife, Sylvia White, at that point, but there really was no evidence to support, that she had been involved in this.
They started looking at a little bit of everything. Maybe it was drinking, maybe it was gambling. Those things just didn't pan out. We started talking to all the brothers, sisters, family members in an effort to either have them saying something culpatory or exculpatory, either or. But we had to eliminate those family members.
The investigation was
a conviction of individuals involved in the death of Billy White. Some local businesses almost doubled the reward money.
There was a tip line so that people could call in and give information.
On February 6, 1992, the tip line lights up.
2.5 weeks after Billy White was murdered, an informant contacts law enforcement about who might have done this.
Coming up, the anonymous tip leads investigators to a familiar face.
He had been operating as an informant in drug buys.
And a stunning admission sends the case in a new direction.
It was like, yeah, I did it.
Two and a half weeks into Billy White Sr.'s murder investigation, an anonymous tipster contacts police with potential information on Billy's killer.
He said, hey, I remember going to a party and this long-haired guy asked me if I know anyone that might kill somebody for him. He said, I was shocked.
The informant says it had been about 2 months since the party, but he'd recently run into the long-haired man again. This time, he claimed that he'd killed Billy himself.
Was bragging about stuff, was talking about it. This is not a wise decision to be discussing what you had been involved in something like this.
The tipster is unsure of the long-haired man's name, but he thinks he works locally in construction.
We checked and checked and checked, and finally we were able to locate an individual with long hair that did a lot of construction work in the area. And as it turns out, that individual happened to be Linwood Taylor.
Law enforcement actually was familiar with Linwood Taylor. He had been operating as an informant in drugs buys for the Lenoir County law enforcement agencies.
On February 12th, 1992, Linwood catches wind that police want to talk to him.
Linwood, on his own volition, came to the sheriff's office and met with law enforcement and the SBI.
When confronted with the tipster's accusations, Linwood says he's never met Billy White and would have no reason to kill him. Linwood even offers to take a polygraph to prove his innocence.
Linwood takes the polygraph examination and they take a little break.
The polygraph exam was completed and there was some deception indicated. One of the things you can look for when you're dealing with someone that has something to hide, they want to stay there and query you to find out what information you have. And eventually, after about 8 hours, Linwood broke down.
Linwood ultimately says, well,
you kind of sense things, and Linwood was not a hardcore killer. He was kind of mild, kind of meek.
But Linwood says he didn't act alone. His uncle, Ernest Basden, was the trigger man.
Linwood said, yeah, he did it. And my next statement was, you did what? And he goes through what happened.
Posing as prospective insurance buyer Timmy Connors, Linwood says he called Billy White to arrange a meeting in a remote location.
When Billy White drove up to this location, Linwood gets out, introduces himself, and says, I need to go pee.
Ernest Basden got the shotgun, came out, pulled the trigger, and Billy White goes down.
He shot him in the chest, puts a new shell in, cocks the shotgun back, and shoots him again in the side.
But what motivated the men to kill Billy White? When investigators pose this question to Linwood, he reveals another startling layer.
Linwood gives me the story that he knows Sylvia White.
He admits that he knows Sylvia White's son. He's done some work over in the house.
Sylvia asked her son if he knew of anyone that could come to her house to do some construction work on a broken window. He knew of Linwood and brought Linwood to Sylvia's house. Upon their first meeting, Sylvia told Linwood, she said, I've got a problem and I hope you can help. And Linwood said, sure, I'll do whatever I need to do. He takes out his measuring tape and thinks he's going to measure the window. When she says, no, I don't need you to fix my window. I need you to kill my husband.
Linwood alleges that Sylvia had good reason for wanting her husband of 20 years dead. She told him that behind closed doors, Billy White wasn't the Southern gentleman he purported to be.
She described to him, that her husband, Billy White, was being abusive to her and different things like that.
Linwood tells investigators Sylvia was so desperate to get rid of Billy that she'd even tried killing him herself.
She had been looking into poisonous plants that she could give him, but at the same time not bring back suspicion onto her.
He would get sick for a period of time, then he would get well again. She couldn't get rid of it.
Linwood says after Sylvia's attempts on Billy's life failed, she reached out to him in December of 1991. Though Linwood was hesitant to help her out at first, Sylvia found a way to sway him.
Sylvia White offered Linwood $20,000 and the van if, in fact, he would do this for her.
He needed the money then. Well, as it turns out, there's no harm with $1,500. That's pretty much the way it went as far as payment.
After the interview, Linwood Taylor was placed under arrest. Law enforcement felt they had enough evidence that she was involved. Warrants for arrest were issued for Sylvia White.
Just an hour after Linwood's arrest, authorities arrive at the home of one of Kinston's most prominent Southern belles, Sylvia White.
I went to her house, knock on the door. She asked, can I get my shoes? I didn't know whether she was going to go upstairs and get a gun or what. So I handcuffed her and I put her in the car, and they escorted her to the Jones County Jail. That was it for Sylvia White.
When confronted with Linwood's allegations, Sylvia maintains her innocence.
She never admitted to setting up the death of Billy White Sr.
She told me she wasn't involved, and she told me, she said, there is a lot going to come out that people don't know about. They'll find out I'm telling the truth.
To build their case, investigators need physical evidence. On the evening of February 13th, they speak with Linwood again in an attempt to locate the murder weapon. Linwood tells investigators that after Ernest shot Billy, they went to Linwood's house to destroy evidence.
They started a barn fire. He takes the shell casings from the shotgun, throws them into the barn fire to burn them.
They had cut the shotgun up, put it in a bucket of cement, and dropped it off of a bridge.
We went back to his home, and his Camaro, the tire impressions matched the narrower tire that was at the murder scene.
We found brass shells that they were trying to burn. Of course, we collected them as evidence.
On the morning of Valentine's Day, 1992, divers suit up along the banks of the Neuse River, ready to search for the murder weapon.
the SBI did get their scuba diving team to go, and they did retrieve the bucket with the shotgun.
We find the bucket, take it out, send it to the lab. The firing pin marking on the shotgun was consistent with what was found on the shells, the shell casings, and those things just conclusively tied Linwood there.
With evidence piling up, investigators are eager to snag the missing piece of the puzzle, Linwood's alleged accomplice.
Law enforcement also now looking for Ernest Mason.
The search doesn't last long. Like Linwood, Ernest turns himself in.
He knew that Linwood had been arrested. It didn't take rocket scientists to figure out that Linwood told him what happened.
He says, well, Linwood told me I needed to confess to you. One of the first things you notice is he's got on Billy White's frame. And he tells me pretty much, yeah, I did it.
Ernest affirming detail.
Very matter of fact, he looked me straight in the eye, looked at him, and he didn't blink. And I just took the shotgun and shot him right in the chest. And then I walked up to him after he dropped on the ground, and I shot him again in the side.
He had a real poker face. He never broke down when I spoke with him. He was like, yeah, I did it for the money.
Linwood paid Mason only $300 to shoot him. I couldn't believe that anybody would kill anybody for $300.
After having given a statement that he was involved in what he did, they placed Ernest Mason under arrest for probable murder.
Coming up, as investigators work to solidify their case, new evidence emerges.
I picked up a book on the shelf and I brought it back to a table. And when I set it down, almost angelic, the book fell open.
And rumors of another murder surface.
What happens inside your home stays inside your home.
Less than a month after the murder of Billy White, investigators have 3 suspects in custody: alleged mastermind Sylvia White and her 2 hitmen. Word of the socialite's fall from grace is a hot topic in Kinston.
It was the buzz of the town. A socially prominent individual hired to kill her husband. That doesn't happen in rural town, North Carolina.
The community could not believe it. It was just like turning a light switch on and off against Sylvia.
With Sylvia behind bars and denying all accusations, investigators still have their work cut out for them.
So law enforcement at that point began working on how to corroborate Linwood's statements.
In interviewing Linwood Taylor, his statement was, she said she had tried to kill Billy White by poisoning him. And I said, well, where'd you get information on poisonings? And Linwood advised me, she said she got it from a book.
They went to the library and started finding books of, I guess, mushrooms or poison.
I picked up a book on the shelf, Poisonous Plants in North Carolina, and I brought it back to a table. And when I set it down, it was almost angelic. The book fell open, I guess because it was a page missing. And I thought about it, I said, she tore this page out.
On March 23rd, 1992, lab techs dust the Book of Poisonous Plants for prints.
So on the opposite side of the page, there would have been the page that you would have held down when you ripped out the page of the book. And guess what was there? Sylvia White's fingerprints.
That corroborated what Linwood Taylor had been telling Eric about
evidence. Investigators still need to identify a motive. In his initial interview, Linwood told detectives Sylvia wanted Billy dead because he was abusive.
As they begin to pull back the layers of the onion, they see that she was using that to manipulate Linwood.
It doesn't take investigators long to figure out a more likely motive.
There was a large life insurance policy on Billy White that she was the beneficiary of, and so she had that to gain.
Sylvia White was to obtain approximately $150,000 for the death of Billy White.
Investigators also believe Sylvia didn't want to answer to anyone.
Sylvia White, she didn't come up from socialite family. They weren't well-to-do. She had clawed herself out of the pits and pretty much up to the top. And once she got to the top, I think it was to the point where she wanted to be on top by herself, using someone else's name, prestige, and someone else's money.
Sylvia didn't want to divorce. Bill because that would have made her look sleazy in a southern way. It was okay to be a widow, but it wasn't okay to divorce your husband.
With the death of Billy, Sylvia White would be able to maintain her status as a socialite. This way it would be a win-win for her.
Through the investigation, all these things started coming together, and it was very satisfying to know that we had put our hands on the individual that took Billy White's life.
Just when investigators think their work is done, surprises continue to emerge. In a follow-up interview, Linwood Taylor tells police that Sylvia had implied she'd killed before.
The conversation that Sylvia White had with Linwood Taylor trying to prompt him to commit the murder for her was that, if you won't do it, I'll do it myself. I had a stepson, but it wasn't right. So she put a bag over its head until it stopped breathing.
Investigators believe Sylvia was referencing the 1973 death of her 4-year-old stepson, Billy Jr.
They were well aware a child had died from an accidental vacation some 10 plus years earlier. But to hear this was quite shocking. How could they prove that that was even true?
Police begin by reaching out to Billy White's grown children.
There had been rumors from some of the kids that she might have been treating her kids better than she was treating his kids.
By all appearances, she's the perfect stepmom, when in reality she was a wicked stepmother.
Billy's children tell investigators that their youngest sibling, Billy Jr., took the brunt of Sylvia's abuse.
When they'd come home from school, he'd be lying down, he'd be crying.
They went to their father several times, and Bill White was a peacemaker, didn't want trouble, and he would tell the boys, hey, she's got her hands full, let's let it be.
The children say they'd always suspected Sylvia killed their youngest brother, but their dad told them not to discuss the matter.
What happens inside your home stays inside your home, and that's kind of a southern thing because you don't hang out your dirty linens for the world to see.
With all the information we had, they opened that case.
In April 1992, investigators enlist the expertise of Dr. John Butts, the state's chief medical examiner.
We got hold of the medical records pertaining to Billy Jr. and his death. They were very problematic. He was alleged to have choked to death on a piece of plastic. This is a rather unusual thing, particularly given the nature of the piece of plastic that was allegedly involved.
The bag that was found in little Billy's throat was removed during the ER visit.
The plastic was described as being approximately 3 inches wide by 10 to 12 inches in length.
Dr. Butts concludes there's no way that little Billy could have ingested such a large portion of plastic on accident.
It was just physically impossible for a little boy to swallow a piece that large and not have some sort of a gag reaction.
It only could have gotten where it was by someone pushing it or shoving it down his throat. It was decided after I had reviewed the record that the death was concerning and suspicious, it was deemed appropriate to go ahead and take a look at Billy Jr.
Coming up, a small casket holds a bounty of evidence.
We found a 4-inch crack in the skull.
She didn't want him. She wanted her freedom.
Less than a year after Sylvia White was arrested for the murder of her husband, investigators suspect she might be responsible for the 1973 death of her stepson, Billy White Jr. On July 16, 1992, authorities exhumed the child's body.
We got it up out of the ground and opened the casket to ensure that it was his. I remember the little kid with a candy-striped blazer on, some shorts, and cowboy boots.
Upon autopsy, Dr. Butts confirms Billy Jr. was the victim of physical abuse.
We found a 4-inch crack in the skull. This indicated
any medical treatment for the fractured skull. That's why he was lethargic. He cried all the time. Evidently, she got tired of him doing whatever he would do, and she would punish him.
Investigators suspect that on June 21, 1973, Sylvia punished Billy Jr. one last time.
She took him to the hospital, and what she told the physician there was he had choked. That's the story she gave the doctor, and the doctor believed her because you got to realize the prestige of Billy White. There were pictures of Billy White and the governor, Billy White and the president.
Investigators tracked down the doctor and a nurse who handled Billy Jr.'s emergency room visit back in 1973.
We go to interview the doctor. He looked at us and he said, "I knew you'd be coming here." Those were his first words.
The nurse tells a similar story. She'd known something was amiss, but followed orders from her supervisor.
She was the attending ER nurse. Something always bothered her about that because the piece of plastic that was lodged in his throat was as big as my fist. And she said, "I know that this little boy did not accidentally swallow this."
She said it was an entire laundry bag crammed down his throat.
Nearly 20 years after the incident, little Billy's death is ruled a homicide, and Sylvia is charged with first-degree murder.
They were well-to-do. The other kids were old enough to take care of themselves. Little Billy wasn't, and she didn't want him. She wanted her freedom. She had no remorse whatsoever.
Despite the evidence against her in both cases, Sylvia continuously denies involvement in the murders of her husband and stepson. Prosecutors decide to try her for Billy Jr.'s murder first.
The reason we did the challenge was that it helped our case from the corroborating Linwood story, but even more so, if I convicted her of that murder, because it happened before the other murder, we would have been able to use that as an aggravating factor for the death penalty.
After a 4-day trial in April 1993, the overwhelming evidence convinces a jury that Sylvia killed her stepson. Shortly after her conviction, Sylvia dodges the death penalty in her husband's murder case.
She then agreed to take a plea guilty to second-degree murder for Billy White Sr.
I think she pled guilty to it because she didn't want to be found guilty and get on the death row. She found the easy way out, plead guilty, and I'll be alive.
Sylvia receives 2 life sentences, with the
He
possibility.
didn't have that to spare. She'll never get out. She'll die in prison.
Sylvia's hired guns also net grim sentences.
James Edward Taylor pled guilty, agreed to testify in the trial, and received a life sentence. Ernest Basin, with the trial, was found guilty of first-degree murder and received the death penalty. He was executed on December 6, 2002.
To this day, folks in Kinston can't help but wonder what turned their sweet Southern belle into a heartless killer.
I think Sylvia felt pressure from the public to be perfect. I think she struggled with that when in reality she had demons and she had no clue how to deal with them.
I knew one person, and she turned out to be somebody else. It is beyond me to understand some of the things she did.
Nearly 30 years later, whispers of Sylvia's crimes still echo through Kinston.
We just didn't feel like it would happen in our city. And it was just a difficult thing to bear.
The impact of Bill White's murder on Kinston was tremendous, and to this day, it is still talked about.
For more information on Snapped, go to oxygen.com.
感谢熊猫大哥啊！熊猫大哥现在变掌控了，欢迎 TP 大哥。
这个人啊，没有包啊。
看卷毛大哥啊。咱应该去买个球，去给来拍，
就是拍，
然后穿个篮球服。
整的那应该抠着好，是不是？
哎，来了来了来了来了！
来电车了，来电车了！
来电车了啊！准备好啊！准备好，准备好啊！准备好，大家准备好啊！
我是不是应该自拍一下？
行，准备车来了，自拍啊！准备好啊！准备好，电车来了啊！我就不念弹幕了啊！
哎
呀，感谢
游戏哥的丘比特！
哎呀呀呀呀呀呀！
不用撞了，这么这边来，拍俺俩来，逗了。感谢
游戏哥，谢谢
游戏哥啊，丘比特！
感谢游戏哥丘比特，谢谢。咱俩口罩在这。感谢游戏哥。
俺俩到这儿打卡。
这脸这么大，
等我拿那个脸整。
谢谢我游戏哥，谢谢，干巴的，谢谢，没看，哎又来了，又来了，
又来电车了，
哎七哥咱俩照顾，车来了，快点。
好美，
车呢？七哥，
马上车就来了，绿皮
来了，
绿皮有感觉没，兄弟们？是不是绿皮？弹幕开开。你呀，游戏哥，
干巴力。